Hi, very good morning to you. It's Jim from Maverickstar Observatory. Guys, we ain't winning nothing here. You know, we may have 50,000 subscribers, but when you put that into context with the fact that there's 8 billion people on this planet, you know, the people that we manage to inform of the truths behind climate change and, other anomalies that are taking place, like the magnetic pole, it's a little drop in the ocean. You know, I won't kid you, we're losing this battle, and we're losing it to, organisations like the United Nations. On your screen right now, you can read it as clear as I can. Climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns. These shifts may be natural, since the 1800s, human activities have been the main driver of climate, primarily due to the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, gas, which produces heat-trapping gases. One of the most abundant gases is completely emitted from this statement, which is water, which is a trimolecule, just like CO2 is, but for some reason that's not important. And yet there's more water vapour than there is carbon in our atmosphere. Carbon makes up 0.4%, and out of that, 0.4% humans actually contribute to very little. And these organisations aren't bringing you those facts. We've talked about this many times on our channel, but the bottom line is that what you're getting right now with a scientist like myself, bringing this information to you, is at some point going to end. Your children are being re-educated at school to believe that human beings are the causes of the climate changes on this planet, whilst at the same time they are admitting a lot of other things like, the magnetic pole reversal, the alterations to the magnetosphere, and the extensive amounts of cosmic radiation that is inbound as a result of a weakened magnetosphere. They've not even looked at these as contributors to changing environments around the world, and therefore climate change. They base their information on temperature records that only go back 200 years. I mean, to be fair, they don't even go back to the 1760s, which was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and they mainly focus on temperature charts from the 1900s. What are they asking us to do? In any case, as far as they're concerned, what are they asking us to do? They're saying save energy at home. Most of our electricity and heat is powered by coal, oil and gas. Use less energy by lowering your heating. Switch to LED light bulbs. If you're doing washing, use cold water and don't use tumble dryers. It's not going to change anything doing these things, but what they're doing, there is a reason. You must ask yourself the question, well, what is the reason for them doing this? It's because climate is a very lucrative business. When you look at some of these wind-powered generators which are appearing all over the open countrysides in a lot of our countries in the West now, the cost of these things are in excess of £20 million each, and the majority of the time they sit not turning because there's not enough wind to power them. Again, it's the same for solar powers. Not every day do you have an ideal amount of luminosity on those panels to run them. You might have overcast, and therefore they're not going to produce optimally the amounts of electricity that they was hoping to. And we can't rely on either of these methods to keep the grids going and keep up with the demand here in the UK. I think it's about 35 gigawatts, and I could show you how much we are actually adding to the system via solar panels and wind generation. What you will see is still we are heavily, and we are always going to be heavily dependent on burning fossil fuels. They're asking us to use less electricity, whilst at the same time telling us to switch from a combustion engine car to an electric car. Well, people with electric vehicles use 6 times more electricity than somebody without an electric vehicle. Not only that, when you look at the environmental impacts through building wind generators, obtaining the silicate to build the solar panels and then to store the power on batteries, the cobalt, lithium, and that's before we even delve into the industries that are using children and women and paying them the least dollar for the hour's work, and then it's completely omitting the environment in which they're working and the conditions. They talk about blood diamonds, and they've pretty much drove largely a stop to that industry. Well, now we've got another industry replacing it, and it's equally as bad. And the problem is, as a scientist, we know that there isn't an endless source of cobalt on the planet. In fact, it's been suggested that there isn't even enough to replace all of the combustion engines in the UK with electric vehicles, simply because the cobalt doesn't exist on this planet, the amount that would be required. The problem is that scientists like me are being silenced. We may have 50,000 subscribers to this channel, but it won't make any difference, because your children right now are being re-educated to the belief that global warming is a man-made problem, and the solution is, as they ask, stop eating meat and dairy products, switch to vegetables and things like that, and corns and seeds and things like that. That's their solution to this problem. Stop using so much electricity, and at the same time we'll invest taxpayers' money from these countries into renewables. Let me show you something. I just want to show you the truth of the impact that man has on our environment, and this is certainly not what they're going to be teaching your children. You should be absolutely angry, because this is what 98% of the world's population believe right now, because of organisations like the United Nations. But on the left hand pie chart at the top in blue, you can see that all atmospheric gases, and they make up 99.6%, and only 0.4% of that is CO2. And on the right hand chart you can see that naturally occurring CO2 mainly comes from the land and oceans. It makes up 999.98%, and only 0.012% is actually man-made. Now, I just ask you this: out of the small proportion that is in our atmosphere, and then out of that small proportion of CO2 that is actually man-made, how can this possibly have any effects on the environmental climate? I just ask you that. But the problem is that we are losing this fight on this front, because they have access to mainstream media, and the majority of the inhabitants of this world just simply don't have an appetite to look into these things themselves, to find out the truth. And even if they do, people like me are becoming rarer. I ask you just to, for one moment, forget the information. Just look at the red line and the blue line. Can you not see a pattern which looks like a heartbeat? I'll explain what this is. This is a cycle. It's like the second hand ticking away on your watch. It moves an exact amount of distance every second. This is a cycle of interglacial and glacial periods. At the end of this chart on the right hand side, you can see where we are at zero. What this means is that we are leaving an interglacial period and moving back into a glacial period. This cycle, by the way, is accepted by all the mainstream organisations, and I include NASA. They know what causes these cycles. It's the Milankovitch cycle of every 100,000 years. What is responsible for this is a change in our orbit around our sun. It goes from a centric orbit to an elliptical orbit, and as we go further out from our sun during that elliptical orbit, we go back into a glacial period. It's a climate regulator. Why has this cycle been omitted from what the United Nations are talking about? Why hasn't no consideration been given for the past 500,000 years of weather? Why do they focus on just temperature charts from the 1800s to the 1900s? Why do they not include the other greenhouse gas? If we're looking at greenhouse gases, why do they not include one of the most abundant greenhouse gases in our atmosphere? Well, if you start to answer some of these questions, or even start asking some of these questions and look for the answers, what you're going to see is that what they're suggesting has nothing to back it up. It has absolutely nothing to back it up with. They've got no idea. And if you come to that conclusion and you realise that the science is bogus, then you've got to ask the question, what is the incentive for telling lies to the general public, or in general the inhabitants of this planet, 8 billion people? Why would they lie? It's about one thing, isn't it? Money. They'll lie to your children in their education. They'll tell you lies. They will disrupt manufacturing processes, all because they want to wax their pockets rich. There is no other reason for it. This is a crime against humanity, what is taking place, and all I can say is that we are losing this battle, and soon there won't be any people like me to bring this attention, these facts to your attention. We just won't be there. We're hardly supported right now. When I ask for support, so I can keep on, doing this, I get called a beggar. What people don't realise is they're very lucky to have someone with my talents to not only bring this information to your attention, but answer some of those questions that you ask. You want to know what starts a magnetic reversal in the first place? I believe I've answered that. You want to know what is the part of the magnetic reversal that causes that acceleration? I've come up with conclusions for these things for you, plausible answers. But we're going to lose this fight. And I really think it's a sad day, when they turn round and they say, the evidence is now conclusive. There is no point in examining this any further because we understand what the causes are. And they shut down the debate. That's very ignorant, and that is never the way to conduct science on any level. This is where we are right now, and it's sad because we're not giving our children and the future generations a fair crack at the whip. I believe that, eventually, in the future, maybe the distant future, but it'll be way too late by then, they will open this debate back up, and they'll realise that this generation was the most selfish generation of people ever living on this planet, because rather than truth, they would put their conscience in the closet and wax their pockets rich. There are climate changes taking place, but it's not for the reasons what they're making out. And the industries which they're creating for, the purpose of saving energy and not emitting CO2 into the atmosphere is a joke. It's all money based. Let me make this very clear to you. As you can see by the right hand side of this chart, you know exactly where we are. You know where we are going from this point on out. 12 to 15,000 years ago, we came out of a glacial period, and humans have thrived on this planet since then. We are going back into a glacial period, and just as we survived and thrived when we came out of a glacial period into a warmer environment, we was able to, put the numbers that we have on the planet that we've got today, 8 billion. But it's coming to an end. And I'll tell you exactly what is going to bring it to an end. And you can do all the research on the earth you want, but you will come down to the same conclusion I have. And that is that natural selection is going to be the result of that figure, 8 billion human beings on this planet, being dramatically reduced. It will be the environmental changes that will reduce the numbers that are able to thrive and survive on this planet. That's what your future generations are going to have to go through, and right now we're doing nothing about it. We're not protecting the infrastructure of cities, and therefore cities cannot survive the comings of the next glacial period. Without no shadow of doubt, this is on our horizon. Whether or not we pass a thermocline, or we have already entered a thermocline, the reason why I say that is because if you look at Arctic sea ice, and I wouldn't go on 2 years as a trend, with environmental changes, for the simple fact I wouldn't use even a 200 or 100 year temperature past track record. I would just use this 400,000 years to gauge what's going to happen. I don't know what really else to tell you as a scientist. All this information has been emitted. And I've tried everything, guys. Where we've always struggled with funding, I've always tried to, do the best of what we could. We couldn't afford 4.5 years ago to pay a company to build the Trimax system for us. So I took it upon myself to, as you know, if you've been following me, to learn how to program electronics and how to assemble them. And we've got that equipment now. We've also got magnetometers out there in the field, which is monitoring to the best of our abilities the location of the magnetic North Pole, which is migrating at the rate it's migrating, and also those intensities where we have magnetometers to this day. With the budget we've had, there is no shadow of doubt we couldn't have done any better than what we have. We could do a lot more, but it's becoming a losing battle now. Trying to inform people of the truth is, we can see the United Nations is having a massive impact on this. And, most of the inhabitants on this planet believe that the reason why they're experiencing climate change is because of man-made CO2. We can't enter that conversation anymore. Science is no longer debatable at this point in time. It is the worst day of human history today, because of that fact alone, that the debate has been shut on a scientific issue. And it's been purposely done. You know why they want to raise that money at COP26, COP27. It won't make any difference. They'll get it eventually. They will. And they will eventually push out, scientists that are prepared to go out their way to bring you this information. So this is a rare day for you guys. And it is going to become a very short-lived one, because inevitably we will lose this battle. Nobody will want to listen anymore. And, not only will they not want to listen, but they certainly won't want to part with their own money to fund stuff like this. It is extremely sad that governments won't put money into anything that says or goes against, the grain of what is causing climate change anymore. So, it's an impossible task now. What you're hearing and what evidence you've seen in this video is so rare in this day and age that you should really think yourselves lucky. You're one of the few that have been given an opportunity to actually participate in a plausible, probably more reasonable explanation as to what is causing these changes in climate. I can't believe that they would not include a magnetic reversal in today's debate for what is possibly causing an increase in the acceleration of probably what we're looking at now, a reglaciation of this planet. Like I say, we don't know where that thermocline is, or even if that is a plausible theory that we do pass a thermocline, but at some point, like everything else, we cross an equilibrium. We will cross an equilibrium which accelerates the magnetic North Pole migration at this moment. We will cross an acceleration point where things go much colder on this planet. At what point that is, we can only put ideas on the table and share them. And the worst thing about this is that even though we're prepared to share these ideas, we're not reaching the amounts of audience that we should be. There should be a lot of things that make you want to participate in this. If you haven't got the motivation to go out there and tell other people about what you've seen in these videos that I've produced, then you should support it with some finance, give us some cash to do our job a little bit better. If you haven't got that, then do whatever you have at your hands that you can physically do. Do what you can do, because I just want you to imagine at some point in the future, maybe yourselves or your loved ones or generations to come that are going to have to experience this natural selection take place. When you spend all week looking for food and you still don't find them. When you walk for miles and miles to a better environment and you can't find it. Nature as a way of controlling, the thriving of any species. And, Darwin found this out years ago. It was called natural selection. A lion can only sustain, a pack of lions in a feeding ground so long as there is enough food for it to feed on. And that's why it regulates the amount of lions in that group. Human beings and every other species is exactly the same. It is the conditions that allow you to thrive, that enables you to thrive. If there's ample food, for humans, if there's ample growing environments, if the temperatures are, in favour of that, then you will thrive. This is a serious topic, guys. We're facing this. You imagine cities when the electricity cables snap and the power stops going into them, when transport is no longer able to be there as a facility to use, when the logistics break down. Just because these things right now have not affected you, do not be under the illusion that they won't. It's just mere luck. I've seen it already. This isn't happening today. It happened years ago for a lot of people. I've seen the tears in their eyes. More work needs to be done. More awareness needs to be created about this. And we need to get a grip of the reins and do a 180 on the way things are going, because if we don't, it won't be just tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people affected directly. It will be billions of people. Do you understand that? Billions of people. As a scientist, I'm not joking right now. It will affect billions of people internationally. We all have a part to play. And, I'll leave it at that, guys. If you want to help support what we do here, then there's a link down there. And the only thing I can say is, you do your own research, think about what I've showed you, discuss it with your loved ones. As always, bye for now.